In a small hillside village where winding paths twisted through the trees like forgotten stories, there lived a young woman named Mira. She was bright, kind, and full of curiosity, but there was something that kept her awake at night, the pressure to follow. Everyone around her seemed to know what to do. Her friends chose careers that matched what was expected. Her neighbors praised those who walked the well-trodden paths: doctor, engineer, manager. Mira, on the other hand, didn't see herself in any of those roles. She wanted to write, not reports, not resumes. She wanted to write stories that moved people, stories that made readers feel seen. But every time she shared that dream, the world responded the same way. That's not practical. You should choose something stable. Be like your cousin. Look at her job, her salary, her house. And slowly, Mira began to question herself. Maybe they were right. Maybe she should stop dreaming and start copying. So she tried. She enrolled in a course she didn't love, wrote papers she didn't believe in, applied for jobs that drained her spirit. And for a while it worked. On the outside, she looked just like everyone else, productive, reliable, on track. But inside, something was breaking. Late one night, overwhelmed by the weight of pretending, Mira went for a walk. She found herself on a trail she had never noticed before, one that veered away from the paved roads and climbed into the forest. She followed it. The air was cool, the moonlight soft, and for the first time in months, the silence felt like permission to be honest. At the top of the trail stood an old carving on a tree, worn by time but still visible. It read, "A path made by another leads only to their destination. To find your own, you must dare to walk where no one has walked before." Mira stood there, breathless, not because of the climb, but because she finally heard what her heart had been trying to say all along. Mira returned home that night with a quiet fire lit inside her. The words carved into that old tree echoed louder than any advice she'd ever received. They didn't shout, they didn't command, they simply reminded her that no one could walk her journey but her. The next morning, she made a small decision. She picked up a notebook, not for a resume, not for someone else's expectations, but for her. And she wrote, just one page, a story about a girl who couldn't sleep because she was pretending to live someone else's life. It wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. That one page turned into another, then a chapter, then two. Mira didn't tell anyone. She wrote during early mornings before work, late nights when everyone else slept, quietly, privately, without applause. And something began to change. She no longer felt the same exhaustion when she walked into the office. Not because the job was fulfilling, it wasn't, but because she knew it was only temporary. Her real life was unfolding between the pages, in the words only she could write. One day, her manager praised her for completing a report ahead of schedule. A coworker asked her how she stayed so calm. She smiled but didn't explain. How could she describe the joy of rediscovering her voice, the quiet power of building something that was truly hers? She didn't need to prove anything anymore. She just needed to keep walking. Because now, for the first time in her life, Mira wasn't chasing someone else's success. She was carving her own path, with ink, with time, with truth. Weeks passed and Mira's routine became her ritual. The world still moved fast around her, social media filled with highlight reels, friends posting new jobs, new homes, new labels of success. And still, Mira kept writing. She didn't talk about her dream. She didn't need to. Every story she finished, every paragraph she refined, was a quiet declaration. I am doing this for me. One evening, while walking home from work, she passed a bookstore and saw a flyer in the window. Short story contest, voices from the unheard. Her heart skipped. She hesitated. Fear whispered the usual lines. You're not ready. You're not good enough. Who do you think you are? But then she remembered that tree on the hill, the words etched into bark by someone she'd never met, but who had once stood where she stood, someone who had chosen to walk their own way. That night, Mira submitted one of her stories. No announcement, no expectation, just a quiet step on her path. And maybe, as you hear this now, there's a path waiting for you too. One that doesn't look like the others, one that might not make sense to your friends or family, one that feels scary, but real. Maybe you've been walking a road that's not yours, following, copying, comparing. But what if your greatest strength lies not in being like anyone else, but in being fully, unshakably, you? This channel isn't here to tell you what to do, it's here to remind you your path is worth carving, your dream is worth keeping. A few weeks later, an email arrived in Mira's inbox. She almost didn't open it. She assumed it was another newsletter, another reminder of someone else's timeline. But when she finally clicked it, the words made her freeze. Congratulations, your story has been selected as a finalist. For a long moment, she just stared at the screen, not in disbelief, but in quiet recognition. She hadn't written to win. She hadn't submitted to be seen. She had simply followed what felt true. Tears filled her eyes, not because she had been validated, but because she had shown up, on her terms, in her voice. Later that day, she walked up to the same hill, to the same trail, to the tree with the carving that had changed everything. She stood before it, the wind rustling the leaves, and whispered, "Thank you." Not to the tree, but to the version of herself who had dared to walk away from imitation, who had taken the first step into the unknown, who had said, "This may not look like success to others, but it feels like truth to me." That night, as the stars shimmered above, Mira didn't scroll through comparisons. She didn't measure her path against anyone else's. She simply sat with a notebook in her lap, a pen in her hand, and wrote a new story. One no one else could have written, because it was hers. She didn't need a map anymore. She had her compass, and it pointed inward. Word about the writing contest spread slowly. Some people from Mira's circle began to notice. A few friends messaged her with surprise. "Wait, you wrote this? Since when are you a writer? Why didn't you tell anyone?" She responded simply, "I didn't need to be seen to start." Those who once doubted her path now looked at her differently. But Mira had already moved beyond needing their approval. Her journey had taught her that recognition is a bonus, not the reason. She wasn't writing to be noticed. She was writing because she couldn't not write. One day, a younger girl from her community reached out. "I've been watching you quietly. I always wanted to start painting, but I thought it was childish. But seeing you follow your passion, it's made me want to try." That message meant more to Mira than any award, because this wasn't just about her anymore. Her quiet courage had become a spark for someone else. And that's how real change spreads, not through noise, but through authenticity, through the brave act of doing the thing you were meant to do, even when no one claps, even when no one understands. Mira knew now. She had chosen the harder path, the lonelier one, but also the one that led her back to herself. She wasn't trying to become a version of someone else's dream anymore. She was living her own, and with each word she wrote, each story she finished, she carved her trail a little deeper, so that maybe, just maybe, someone behind her would feel brave enough to do the same. Years from now, people would read Mira's stories and feel something stir in their hearts. They wouldn't know about the quiet nights she spent doubting herself, or the voices she had to silence just to hear her own. They would only feel the honesty in her words, the courage tucked between the lines, and that was enough. She never became the loudest voice in the room. She never chased trends. But Mira had done something far more powerful. She had honored her truth. Her bookshelf was never the most crowded, but each story she placed there carried weight. It was her fingerprint on the world, not loud, not polished, but real. And if you're still listening, maybe you've been walking someone else's road too long. Maybe you've followed the noise, trying to fit into a path that was never meant for you. But here's what Mira would tell you if she could. You don't have to copy anyone else to matter. You don't have to be seen to start. You don't need permission to create something beautiful. All you need is the courage to begin. And if there's a story inside you, an idea, a vision, a path that feels too strange, too small, too uncertain, don't ignore it. Follow it, even if no one understands it yet. Because the greatest lives are not the ones that follow a script. They're the ones carved step by those who dare to walk their own way. So now, ask yourself this. If you stopped living like someone else's echo, what would your true voice sound like? The end.